All right, hello everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today on supporting disabled and international visitors on your airport website. We have a great panel here lined up, so we're looking forward to presenting everything we have for you today. We'll just jump right into our panelist introductions. We have some awesome panelists here ready to share some great information with you. So first, we'll start with Will DeFeis.
Hey, thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Will DeFeis. I work at the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey in the Aviation department, where I am a customer experience program manager. The program I specifically focus on is the ADA and Title VI program, so really generally our non-discrimination program. Excited to be here today with you all. Thanks.
Hi there, everyone. My name is Kim Hunt. I'm the VP of Communications here at the Birmingham Shuttlesworth International Airport in Alabama, not in the UK. I'm really happy to be here today. My area here at the airport for overview is really communications and marketing and the website. I do some customer experience work as well. That's kind of a collaborative airport here. I mean, a collaborative effort, if you will, here at our small airport. But I really enjoy the airport world, and I'm really happy to be here today. Hope to learn some things myself.
All right. Thank you, Will. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Craig. I'm Matt Cox. I head up Recite Me Americas. Also relatable to Kim. Despite my accent, I'm not in the UK. I live and work in Virginia, and I'm based right next to Washington Dulles Airport. I'm looking forward to sharing a little bit more about how Recite Me collaborates with airports to help create an accessible and inclusive online environment.
Awesome, thank you, Matt. So yeah, in today's webinar, we will be diving into the need for accessible and inclusive airport websites, looking into the importance of offering an inclusive online experience that meets the diverse needs of all travelers, including those who are neurodivergent, elderly, or speak English as a second language. So before we dive in, we'll do a quick poll or a quick quiz to kind of get us thinking about accessibility and inclusion online. So I'm going to launch this poll here. I think it's going to show us two questions. Number one being, hopefully everyone can see it okay, what percentage of US households speak a language other than English at home? All right, so that answer for that one is actually 21%. So that's 68 million households within the US that speak a language other than English at home that could definitely benefit from multilingual and translation on websites. For our second question, we have 1 in 4 adults in the US has some type of disability. In total, how much do disabled travelers and their families spend on trips annually? So you have 550 million, 13 billion, or 59 billion. Looks like we're voting pretty quick here. That's awesome. Great engagement. So the answer for that one is actually 59 billion, a huge number to think about when you're thinking about disabled passengers and travelers and their families spending on travel. So from there, with that in mind, let's jump over to Will to highlight the importance of digital accessibility from the customer experience perspective.
Thank you, Craig. All right, so thank you again for having me. So in my role at the Port Authority, I oversee the ADA and Title VI program for our airports. And those airports that the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey oversees are Newark Airport, John F. Kennedy Airport, LaGuardia Airport, Stewart Airport. So yes, we'll jump into the first slide. Accessibility in general is more important than ever. And Craig sort of touched on some of this as we have longer life expectancy, better medical care, better assistive technologies, tech innovations, more societal awareness. We're necessitating the need for more accessibility in our world. For the purposes of this presentation, accessibility includes both that for people with disabilities and people with limited English proficiency. So that's what I mean when I'm saying accessibility. So airports connect people, and all people should have equitable access to public services like airports. Accessibility is crucial for a lot of reasons, of course, but we can boil it down to a couple of things. One being that regulatory compliance, so the legal standards, the regulations for accessibility, like the Americans with Disabilities Act or the Air Carrier Access Act. And then there's also the moral and business case, which is really important too. And it's the right thing to do, is that moral case. All people should be able to have equitable access to experiences and services without barriers to inclusion. And if there's the sort of access where people feel like they can equitably access those experiences at the airport, then they can also spend their money or get the same goods and services as everyone else there. So it really increases the bottom line too. When we think about accessibility, a lot of the times in these spaces, we're usually talking about physical spaces, like the infrastructures of buildings, our parking, our ground transportation, our terminal frontages, things like that. But in an increasingly online digital world, there's a huge opportunity and need to have accessibility there. And that's both for people with disabilities and limited English proficiencies. So airports are expected to follow suit. Of course, there are resources like the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines to guide online accessibility. While the ADA doesn't specifically mention the WCAG or those Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, it does require that digital and online content provided by covered entities be accessible to individuals with disabilities. So there is definitely a case for these sorts of standards in the ADA. So while it's not mandated by law, it's often used as a reference point for the accessibility of digital content and websites. At the Port Authority, we are aware of that, and we work to create the most accessible experience from websites to terminals and beyond. You can go to the next slide. I want to talk a little bit specifically about the Port Authority's commitment to accessibility in all of our digital platforms, and that's for all of those 4 airports that I listed, Newark, JFK, LaGuardia, and Stewart. I first want to start by saying that we have an accessibility standard, a website accessibility standard statement that expresses our commitment to making our websites accessible for all. And we aim to exceed in that statement the formal web content accessibility guidelines that I think will be discussed later in this webinar. Additionally, and you can see on the screen, there's actually a screenshot of it, we have an airport customer experience performance and standards manual. And this manual sets the tone for all of our customer experience initiatives, strategy, and operations. Accessibility actually is a core service element within our standards. There's a section for it, and it's embedded throughout the manual. Specifically, we commit to providing up-to-date and accurate information on airport accessibility and assistance in advance and make available to all customers in a variety of accessible formats. And we also commit to providing assistance as required by any customer through all airport journey steps. This assistance may be pre-bookable, but will also be available without the need for prior notification. Included in this commitment and in what we include in the manual is for our digital platforms, namely our websites, as a crucial part of our accessibility and non-discrimination program. And I also include a screenshot here that's one of the excerpts from one of the sections that speaks to some of the website accessibility standards, saying that the communication, such as in our websites, be inspirational, accessible, and informative for all customers. Now, with a baseline understanding of our standards surrounding accessibility at the Port Authority airports, I want to talk a little bit about the journey map process. When considering customer experience, we often look at all aspects of the passenger journey for various customer segments. And this is crucial since different types of passengers with different backgrounds and experiences actually experience the airport differently. This is especially true when we think about people with disabilities and limited English proficiency who come to access airports. When we use tools like a journey map, it supports a customer-centric culture, and it allows us to actually create understanding and empathy for all customer segments. From thinking about customer segments and their specific interactions with different journey steps, we're then able to identify pain points and needs to make experiences better. Digital accessibility is intrinsically linked to this journey map process and exercises that we take because we're living in an increasingly digitized world where we seek information from our tech devices like our mobile phones, your iPhone, your tablets, your laptops, And that's often without really wanting to connect with anyone who works at the airport or anyone who works for the airline. A lot of us prefer to just pick up our phone and try and find information ourselves. So because we're relying more and more on our devices and online information to get us where we need to go, the accountability for digital accessibility only grows. We'll go to the next slide and talk about the journey map a little bit closer. I thought this would be a helpful illustration from our standards manual at the Port Authority in our aviation department. It depicts the baseline passenger journey for an airport experience. And this is one which we expect most passengers from a broad perspective to be impacted by. So it includes pre-departure, departure, arrivals, and connections. In our considerations of the customer journeys, we're informed by several core service elements, and these are the elements that are impacted along the way of each of the journey steps. On the bottom left of this slide, it goes over what the 8 core service elements that we have are. Number 2 on that list is accessibility. You can see, or if you take a look under each of the journey steps in each section of the customer journey actually has considerations of accessibility because it's listing the number of core service element that's impacted each step of the way. I always recommend that folks think about how people with accessibility needs, be that someone with a disability or limited English proficiency, is impacted by different steps in the journey. So if we think about the stress level that goes into perhaps the security checkpoint, that's usually a stressful time during a customer's journey. And how would someone with a disability or someone with limited English proficiency be further stressed or have further barriers put into place due to the lack of access? I added a highlight for this conversation specifically on the pre-departure journey step, as it's a good place to consider why digital accessibility is so important. And we'll go to the next slide and look at that a little bit closer. If we drill down on the pre-departure step, there's a huge portion of that that's impacted by our websites and online accessibility. Customers are often planning ahead for their journeys because they want to make sure that they're getting to the airport on time, they have enough time to relax maybe before their flight. It's usually a pretty stressful experience, just depending on what type of customer or why you're traveling that day. Folks with disabilities need to be really intentional about their travel to ensure they have everything that they need to access the airport so that they can make it to their flight and they can maintain that dignity and respect along the way. As discussed a few times, we do live in an increasingly digitized world that relies on technology and website information. And it means that our websites have to have comprehensive information that describes all accessibility services that exist at an airport. And those websites also need to be accessible themselves. In line with modern approaches to understanding accessibility, we work to center individual needs and ensure that our goods and services are equipped to provide everyone equitable experiences, not just as an afterthought. Again, and something so important to that is making sure that information is accessible. At the Port Authority for our airports, we have accessibility services pages on each of our airport websites. And information there just lays out exactly all of the accessibility services that are available to customers. And we do this in a way that is clear, concise, and has accessibility at its core. So that actually comes down to having things like assistive tools like Recite Me to do that. We embed Recite Me directly onto our Port Authority web pages, and it provides standard tools like screen readers, contrast toggles, font size customizations, and translation services to make the website accessible for the greatest number of people. It's the right thing to do, but it also supports better business outcomes. In this space, when we're in accessibility advocacy or disability advocacy, we need to continue to be dynamic to reflect what the needs of the customer are and to flex when improvements are needed. we need to welcome feedback to improve and adapt with the times to make sure we're making our websites accessible for all. So what I'll leave you with for now is that at airports, we provide a really crucial public service to connect people around the world and around the country. And equitable access allows people to do that, allows people to have access to do that, and it doesn't leave anyone behind. So I really appreciate being included to participate today, and thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Will. We really appreciate that. It's great to hear that you've taken, or your organization overall has taken such a progressive stance on accessibility and inclusion online. And it's awesome to hear that Recite Me can play a role in that. So thank you for being an awesome client of ours. Now let's head over to Matt to explore some of the solutions Recite Me offers as an accessibility partner.
Absolutely. And thank you, Will. It's wonderful to see that overview and see how much depth goes into the customer journey as well. Airports are one of those unique websites where there's so many different ways to use them and gather information, and people with differing disabilities, neurodiversity, or indeed those translation needs each need to access information in kind of a unique way sometimes. So fantastic to see that customer journey and how you look at the individual. One of the things that I want to expand on a little bit more is Will had touched on the WCAG and the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So here at Recite Me, we approach accessibility in two different ways. There's the real-time accessibility, translations, and what we call front-end inclusion. We'll come back to that a little bit later and show some real-time examples of that working, but the section I'd like to spend a few moments talking about now is the back-end accessible build. Specifically for airports, think of this kind of like in the physical world as the equivalent blueprint to building accessibility into a terminal building or your departure gates. This is how it's relating to the website and building the best possible online experience for visitors with their own assistive technology. In some cases, retroactively correcting and then indeed maintaining accessibility standards into the future. If we move to the next slide, please, Craig. So when we talk of an accessible website, compliance is a term that's vital, specifically, again, focusing on the WCAG guidelines. There's typically three levels of compliance. A is the must-do, kind of the start of your journey, if you like, and really the minimums that folks should be looking at. Double A is where it's at. That's where the industry recognises the standard. If you're going to work on making an accessible website, we'd recommend working on A level first and then focusing on double A. And AAA standard is for those that want to offer really an enhanced accessibility experience. So yeah, next slide, please, Craig. So how do we do it? Our checker tool scans 78 criteria guidelines, 390 techniques. 200 of those are computer fixes and 190 are human. And one thing we'll often get asked is, why can't a computer fix everything? So to give you an example of that on the next slide, we'll make it pretty simple. So say, for example, you have an image that's missing an alternative text tag. And I actually scanned and checked a couple of airport websites before jumping on the webinar, and alternative text was a pretty common challenge across many of them. But say, for example, you've got a picture of an airplane about to take off. The computer would be able to check the website and detect that there was a missing tag behind it, but it would need a human to identify the image and formulate the description of that airplane taking off. So on the next slide, we can talk about what a check might show. Well, you might need to squint your eyes just a touch or move the zoom icon in the top right, but this is an organisation that we scanned and it was given an accessibility score of 42%, which sounds like they've got a bit of work to do, but when you look at level A, they've actually got an 82% score. So it's a good start, but there's work to do. There's 25 fixes and 21 checks before they would start working on double A, which then has 126 findings and 74 fixes, 52 checks. But within each fix, organizations, their users are able to view and identify the exact element that requires attention and, of course, make that fix. How? So on the next slide, within each error, the checker will specifically identify the locations of the errors on your website, show the actions required to fix, and provide its recommendations. It also allows for team collab. So lots of organizations have different folks looking at the website, maintaining standards. That collab allows folks to see what's being worked on or what is indeed taken care of and fixed. And progress is key. So what progress can an organization make? Each check, change, and completed fix is logged, and over time allows your organization to show your progress. WCAG is a set of guidelines. Those guidelines can change and be updated over time. We often describe meeting those standards as a journey and not a destination. And equally with websites, the content can change frequently, and you can also have many people adding content to a website. So it's key that organizations ensure that standards are maintained and improved. So kind of like a health tracker, if your progress fell behind, you will have a visual to see and take action. And also with those multiple stakeholders adding content, it can be a key step to make sure that the standards are being maintained across the organization. We also have people to answer across all of our roles. Everybody has someone to answer to. Organizations also have very detailed and dedicated accessibility statements. We want the ability to share results with relevant stakeholders, make sure that you're maintaining the standards that you say you are, and show progress over time and attainment of those goals. So our tool will allow organizations to report on various elements of that process and make sure everybody that needs to be in the know is indeed in the know. And we also have a dedicated resource hub. So folks that want to know more, it allows you to gain insight into the methodology, cover any FAQs, we have how-to videos. So for any organizations utilizing the tools such as the checker, the goal really is to ensure that all users are comfortable and confident with how to use and are able to set about the actions to make a difference in maintaining your accessibility standards. All right.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt, for running through that, the Recite Me Accessibility Checker. Now we want to jump over to Kim to kind of hear firsthand why online inclusion is so important for airports and travel organizations that the Birmingham Airport Authority has found.
I'll say right up front that we are much younger in our journey to accessibility than certainly than New York is. I certainly applaud everything that you're doing, Will. My goal now is to have a journey map. I'm gonna have to work on that. But I thought what I would just do real quickly here is just share from my perspective some of what's been happening here in Birmingham. And we, like I said, we're pretty young in this, and so maybe that's something that might help some of the participants that are on the webinar today. So there's been talk about compliance, which is very important. I will tell you that I arrived here a couple of years ago. It'll be 2 years next week. And one of the first things I learned when I got here, or right before I got here, is that the airport had launched a brand new website. It literally had been launched like 4 weeks earlier. I was told that it was compliant. There was an accessibility statement. All of that was a really big relief to me. But I think it is important for all of us to remember, especially on the front end of a journey like this one, is that there's a big difference between compliance and true customer care, which is really the goal. We all want to be compliant, and there are technical ways for us to gain all the expertise that we need to become compliant. But when it comes to true customer care, really thinking about what people experience from the time they're planning a trip to the time that they're arriving at the airport, to the time that they're making their way from the parking lot into the terminal, to a ticket counter to check a bag through security, all of those things that Will talked about so eloquently, that's really what our focus needs to be from the customer experience perspective. And so I wanted to just talk a little bit about that, again, remembering that I'm on the front end, and you can go ahead and change the slide. I just put up a couple of pictures here, and here's what happened. I don't know if any of you have ever had kind of an aha moment where you just realize that there was something you needed to be doing that you weren't doing. And I will tell you, here at the Birmingham airport, we do not have somebody fully dedicated to this. And so I think in time, I think that has started slowly to change, which is one of the reasons why I'm here today. But here's what happened. I commonly, and for many, many years in my airport life, have done tours of my airport. I love doing them. I love bringing visitors in. It's a lot of fun. We scheduled a tour here about a year ago for an organization called the Alabama Institute for the Deaf and Blind. They were going to be bringing 20 to 25 people with them. We scheduled the tour well in advance. And then 2 or 3 weeks out, as I was looking at my calendar, I looked at that and I just froze. And the reason why I froze is because I thought everything that I do in the tours where I take people around the airport really is visual. It's showing people this. It's looking at the flight information display system. It's, we'll have kids, literally pick a flight and talk through whether the flight's on time. I mean, all those kind of things would not work for this tour. And it kind of it really struck me that, oh my goodness, I need to really think about this. And so I did what you would expect me to do. Probably I set a meeting with the organization. I got on a call with them and I just explained to them, look, I want this tour to be meaningful for the folks who are coming out here. And I really need your help. Because this is an area that I have never delved into. And so what we did is we set up a Zoom call with a couple of clients that they serve, one of whom had never traveled and never been to the airport, and one who does actually travel. She's is sight impaired, but she does travel quite frequently. And so it was very, very enlightening for me. And I tell you that story only because if some of you are like me, you're on the kind of the aha end of this, where you're really just starting to think about what you need to be doing at your airport, to go beyond compliance and start moving to AA. I'm hoping that this is helpful to you. So Recite Me was really the first really large piece of technology that we employed. And I think that it's one of those things. We launched it. We have not had it very long now. We launched it. We did a really soft launch in February. And so one of the things I did was I literally gathered every single organization in our area that serves people who are visual or hearing impaired, and basically sent out information to them, because you really can only be a big help if people know about it. And of course, organically, people who need these kinds of services tend to find them on your website, on the accessibility, click through and whatnot. And you do see that on a lot of websites now, even retail sites. But we are really slowly starting to, between myself and our ADA coordinator and Title VI coordinator and DBE administrator, that's a lot put together. But we are really starting slowly to look at different technologies in addition to Recite Me. Recite Me was the perfect start for us. Putting it on our website so that people who are planning trips or need to visit the website can have all of those incredible tools. So we're really, really excited about that. We also do some other things, some outreach here, like, the Wings for Autism type situation. We have the sensory room in our airport, which we talk about on our website. We have a meditation room. We're looking at some additional kinds of technology, IRA being one of them, for those folks who visit the airport and really want to be independent. We're also looking at language line solutions, and that's some of you may be familiar with that. That I was not familiar with that until just recently, but apparently, that's a service that we can employ for when we have international visitors here, or just people in our community who are at the airport who do not speak English, or don't speak English very well. We can use that app internally so that our employees can better communicate with our visitors. And so you tackle it from lots of different angles. You don't employ one thing and say, oh, wow, that's good, I'm done. It's just another step toward getting to where you are actually making your airport more accessible. And so I would just encourage you not to feel overwhelmed or not to feel like there's just too much to do. You take one step at a time. And you really, really, if you're in an organization where you already have that champion, then that's one hurdle. In my airport, we are kind of creating a small team of champions to keep moving forward on this. We're not going to get to our journey map overnight, but we are going to work on making sure that our airport is as accessible as possible, and that everyone who comes to this airport, I know this sounds cliche, but has the best possible experience, has what they need the way they need it.
That's great. Thank you, Kim, for sharing that. We're happy to hear that Recite Me is part of your initial efforts into creating inclusive digital spaces, in addition to those inclusive physical spaces you just shared there. Now I'm going to hand the controls over to Matt to do a little bit more demonstration of some of our solutions that we have on the Recite Me side. So Matt, if you'd like to take it away, looking forward to seeing some live examples.
Thank you, Craig, and forgive me for popping off screen. I just wanted to share my screen. Kim, that's wonderful to hear. Thank you for that background. And I think the approach you've outlined there shows that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to accessibility. There's nothing you can kind of just get out of the box and then you're done. It's ongoing efforts, and there's always something else that you can deliver. So the Recite Me toolbar has been mentioned a couple of times, obviously, throughout these, and this is the front-end approach to accessibility that I wanted to chat about, and just show you a couple of different ways that this might be utilized. The toolbar covers a number of features, from reading aids to translation needs. Even folks who have color blindness can toggle contrasts and make a difference to their accessibility experience. And it goes back to the fact that everybody has unique needs, and the toolbar, we believe, helps folks configure essentially their own prescription, so their own way of viewing your website. But in having a tool like Recite Me on the website, it takes the onus away from the individual, from having all of their own tools and technologies. And many of the challenges around online access are often hidden disabilities or hidden neurodiversity, and folks don't always have the avenue as they would if they were physically in the airport building to put their hand up and say, I'm struggling here, can you help me out a little, or is there a different way I can do this? So I've got the John F. Kennedy International Airport accessibility page up here, and you can see the accessibility tools button, which would launch Recite Me. And a couple of quick things where people might utilize this. There's an inbuilt screen reader, so we can utilize and read a body of text.
Image, entrance to an elevator at JFK International Airport.
And good to see the alternative text there, Will, that I mentioned earlier is in place, and behind the image there, it will also read a body of text.
Important, this website utilizes the link, Recite Me Accessibility Toolbar.
Now, this is a fantastic page with lots and lots of information, but we may also want somebody to be able to translate this. So there's 135 different languages, 65 of these have text to speech. The poll showed the most common was Spanish. So to give you a feel of the Spanish translation, we can see now the whole web page has been translated instantly into Spanish. And Spanish also has the screen reader, which will read in a localized
Importante,
accent.
este sitio web utiliza el enlace Recite.me / herramientas de accesibilidad, a la que se...
Translations are huge and really, really well utilized across airport websites. We may also have somebody who just wants to increase the font size a little, or maybe even change the font entirely. So really, as we go through this, it's all about allowing the end user to create the configuration that works specifically for them. One of the things I was looking at on Kim's website as well is I live really close to Washington Dulles Airport. I'm originally from the UK, so family come to visit from time to time. And one of the things that I use quite frequently is the arrivals board, so I can check if their flight is on time. And it's often in tabular format. So one of the tools that I've had feedback from end users on is that things like our reading ruler really help break this down. Recite Me was founded because our own CEO is severely dyslexic, and one of the challenges he has is that when you get in a body of text, it's hard to stay on the same line sometimes. So things like the reading ruler really, really help give that level of focus. Or inversely, we can use things like the masking tool to allow users to focus on specific elements as well. Obviously, there's lots more the toolbar can do, but I wanted to show you a couple of quick ways that people would interact with the toolbar on an airport website, and hopefully that gives a little bit of insight. Obviously, if anyone wants to dive into more detail, I'd be more than happy at some point to walk them through it.
Great, thank you, Matt. So yeah, now you saw the kind of the front end and the back end for the checker and the toolbar for that inclusive front end build. So from there, I kind of wanted to jump into some of the questions that were submitted by our attendees here. So if that's all right, Will, I have one here that seems to be more towards your side. If that's cool, I have a question. Do you have any additional quick tips for creating an inclusive and accessible experience for travelers, both on and offline? I know you covered some of that. Is there any quick answers for that one?
Yeah, I think, and thank you. I think that what immediately comes to mind for that is bringing in like end users, bringing in community engagement of some sort. And I really like that Kim mentioned that too for that visit she was talking about with folks who were blind or hard of hearing, that you bring them in to see what they need to get a good experience. So for us, we have at the Port Authority an employee business resource group called the Port Authority Abilities Network. And that's our disability inclusion group. And we like to bring them into as our sort of like think tank or crowdsource information to review when we're doing anything to do with accessibility. We use them when we were creating our standards manual, as well as some other organizations. I think it's a really helpful way to include perspective from the jump and not having to go back and correct yourself later on. One thing that, and I'll just mention it because Matt brought up the JFK accessibility page. We have right now an AI American Sign Language translation tool pilot that we're doing there. And on that, it helps so that folks who used ASL as their first language or that's their preferred language, they can use that when they're going through our website. And with that as an example of an initiative we've done, we try to like get user feedback. We try and get feedback from staff who are fluent in ASL, and we try and also just make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable when we receive feedback. The other thing that comes to mind with this is that there's a saying, it's in a lot of like diversity, equity, and inclusion spaces, but I hear it a lot for disability advocacy, that is nothing about us without us. And that should ring true in a lot of work, but I think it's especially true when you're thinking of the full breadth and depth of what disability can look like.
Great, thank you. So on the other one, we have another question here for Kim. So that we talked about how you seek feedback. Can you share any examples of how Birmingham Airport has tailored their communication channels to kind of cater to travelers that have various cultural backgrounds and potential language preferences?
I would say probably at this point we're typically doing it, in many of the channels that you would probably expect. We do regular social media posts, particularly on Recite Me, since it's still relatively new. And so we're trying to again get the word out that we have the toolbar on our website, and that it's new and that it will really help travelers who just see things differently. So there's that, and I think I might have mentioned a moment ago, really doing some outreach, because this is, I will tell you, and this is just has been my experience. Will may have a totally different experience, I suspect, so in a large area like where he is, but it's not something that we get a lot of feedback on, or that we got people begging us to do. It was just something we knew that we needed to do. It's not acceptable to be thinking of it as such that, people are just used to overcoming hurdles. They know how to do it. They don't travel alone. They do, so all those things may be true, but as an airport, we can do better. And so I think for us, the key is going to be outreach. And I know I have been exploring the possibility of putting together I don't like committees. All of us that work at airports probably would wish that we never had to hear the word committee, but sometimes they really, as Will mentioned, can really, really be useful. We need to get people into our airport who can help us make sure that we are looking at this the right way, that we are not missing anything, that we don't look at something that sounds like it would be a really great idea, and the people who really need it say that's really not what we need. And so I think that is going to be really, really critical to us as we move forward. You know, we talked about doing the sunflower, and I have to look at what it's called, the hidden disability sunflower. And I know some airports are doing it. You know, it strikes me as something that you really kind of have to think about before you do it. And it almost, in some respects, flies in the face of what we've always learned, because you're asking somebody, or at least encouraging somebody, to wear something that points them out as someone with a disability. And that's fine for people who wish to do that. But what I've told our team here internally is while I love the idea of doing it, it really has to be something that everybody buys into and everybody understands and everybody's willing to participate in, because without the real people doing it inside the airport and understanding it and really reaching out to others, it's not going to be successful. And so I think for us, you know, communication channels are really critical, and really trying to find the right way to reach people and, like Will said, get the feedback that we need in order to make the right decisions.
Great, thank you, Kim. That's great answer to that. I appreciate that outlook. So yeah, we're kind of running out of time here. Just wanted to go around the table. If anyone has key takeaways that you'd like to present, you know, maybe actionable insights or something, you know, just the last takeaway for our webinar here before we break. You want to start with Will, if you have something you'd like to present?
Sure. And I think it just rings true to everything that we're saying today. Always consider the customer journey for folks with diverse needs. And I think nowadays we can say that that journey starts and ends and everything in between on our websites online. So website accessibility is paramount importance.
Great, thanks, Will. How about Kim?
I would just reiterate something I said, and that is, don't be overwhelmed, because it can be a little bit overwhelming. I know when I took the Recite Me contract to my boss, he said, "What's that?" And I explained to him, and he looked at me, you know. So I mean, I think it's an educational process for you, and you know, and don't be afraid to become the champion on your team. It may not be in your job description, but it doesn't have to be, as long as you have the blessing of your boss and there's a collaborative effort there. You can put together a group of you know of champions who can help you really move your airport in the right direction.
Great. Yeah, we've definitely met some champions through our different client meetings over the years, of, you know, people who are really willing to put their effort in and kind of push it all the way up the flagpole and make accessibility a priority. So that's super meaningful for us. And Matt, a key takeaway?
I think it's a mix of both Will and Kim's approach. For me, it was fantastic to see the customer journey that Will had laid out, and just really see in one place the things that we know about the different ways folks can interact with an airport and the website, and how vital it is that accessibility is at the heart of that. And the takeaway from Kim is that there's lots of things that you can be doing, no matter how little or how big. Every day you can be a little bit better in your approach to accessibility. So yeah, key takeaways from both.
Excellent. Well, yeah, thank you. That'll kind of conclude our webinar for today. If you have any questions or comments, you know, please feel free to reach out to us at info@reciteme.com. And thank you very much to our panelists and attendees. We appreciate both of you for attending and presenting all this valuable information. And yeah, have a great rest of your day from all of us here.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Take care.
Thank you.
Recite Me, believing in accessibility for all.